Hey everyone, it's Evan Kirstel. We have a fascinating topic to us telecom geeks today, looking at the end of an era, right, Dave?
It's end. The end of an era is an understatement. I mean, we're talking century era.
Well, we're not talking the end of humanity. We're just talking the end of the POTS network, the plain old telephony network, the copper network that was so tried and true for over 100 years since Dave Michaels was born. And it's sunsetting, I guess, to put it nicely. And we have a great guest to talk about that, Chris from Ooma. Chris, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. This is a topic that I always like to joke with Dave Michaels that he's as old as the telephone network, but not quite. I'm
But
really harsh
POTS
with him.
is as old as the telephone network.
POTS is as old as the telephone network. But before we jump into all that good stuff, Chris, maybe introduce yourself, your role at Ooma, and maybe a little bit about the company before we dive in.
Sure, happy to do that. So, Chris Berge, I'm responsible for corporate development, and in parlance in business, what that means is strategy, corporate development, mergers and acquisitions, all fall under strategic partnerships, all fall under my purview. And if you're not familiar with Ooma, we're probably most well known for our longstanding heritage in the residential VoIP space. We've been at that since 2004, but we dipped our toe into UCaaS and general business communications about 9 years ago, and that's been the thrust of the growth for the business. And while we are a SaaS company, we build hardware because of our heritage, which kind of leads into the discussion today. There's some really neat things that we can do with that capability.
Well, we like hardware. We're going to dive into all that. But I sort of preempted the discussion. What is the copper line sunset? What is the POTS dilemma, the reality of plain old telephony in the world today, both business and residential? I'm curious on your take.
Yeah, as you both mentioned, the network has been around for a very long time. This was the heritage of how we all got into voice in the first place. And what's been interesting is because of the length of time that it's been around, the quality's begun to degrade, and it's gotten really expensive to maintain all of that legacy infrastructure. In fact, you have a lot of the technicians that used to go into central offices are retiring, so you don't have the same
Oh, wow.
expertise to go work on this equipment. And the carriers have, by and large, wanted to migrate to more modern technologies, as you can imagine. The issue was this was a regulated network, so the FCC had control over it. And what ultimately wound up happening is the FCC issued an order that allowed two different things to occur. One is that carriers could choose to turn off the network. Doesn't mandate anything, but they could choose to turn it off. And then more importantly, they also allowed forbearance. And so in communications parlance, that means they can charge whatever they want for POTS lines, for instance, or T1s and other solutions that leverage copper. And so it's really set into motion this longstanding desire for the carriers to kind of move away from this infrastructure and use price is frankly a vehicle to try to incent customers to do so.
So I
Wow.
like this term sunset. It sounds so romantic, actually. But what does it actually mean that POTS is going to sunset? Is there a specific date or something like that?
Yeah, there was a lot of misconception out in the space for a while that there was a line drawn in the sand. It was supposed to be August of last year, and that's not actually what the order said at all. So sunset is kind of an apt term because it's at the kind of the desired progression for the incumbent carriers to do this whenever they want. And you've seen kind of a smorgasbord of different carriers taking different approaches. So AT&T, for instance, in their investor day last year shared that they'd like to turn off 50% of their copper network in the next 3 years and then circle around and do the rest over time. Others are a bit more aggressive. We've seen Windstream just turning service off. And what's interesting is it can get folks in a pickle. And we actually had a hotel in San Francisco. They had POTS lines in that location into their PBX, and their underlying carrier just shut them all off
Oh,
suddenly. And
fantastic.
and it's a hotel, so they depend heavily on phones for communications to the outside world. So it's you'll see again a mixed bag between all the different carriers, but this is inevitably going to happen at some point and impact everybody that leverages POTS lines. Whether it's in this applies to the residential space too, but whether you're somebody at home with home phone service or you're a business that's using POTS lines for different solutions that are necessary in your environment.
Yeah, I heard you talk about a number of almost what 20 million POTS lines to U.S. businesses? Is that
Businesses, yeah.
even
It's
possible?
astonishing. It's
So we're
astonishing how
talking
much
about
is
a
left.
sunset, end of life. What does that mean, not just for the copper wires, but the devices? I mean, so when you say sunset, what are you referring to exactly?
Yeah, and so kind of the issue is you have all the easy things to migrate have largely been migrated to more modern solutions. I mean, this is where we all started in VoIP, right, back in the
Mhm.
space, and then cloud solutions. So all those traditional voice lines, in a large part, have been migrated to modern platforms. But then you have a whole slew of specialty devices where that may be the only way that they can communicate in an environment where it's too expensive to upgrade them to more modern solutions, but they're absolutely necessary, sometimes life safety systems, so really critical to that environment. And so it's put a lot of pressure on companies to begin to develop a strategy for how do we do this? Are we proactive? Are we reactive? What happens if the line suddenly gets shut off in my
Mm.
environment, and how does that impact my organization? And similarly, in the residential side, you have a lot of the elderly population that still uses POTS
Mm.
lines as their way to communicate, and trying to build awareness out there that this is happening. You need to look at solutions to replace however you're using that POTS line today.
Wow.
So, technologies come and go all the time, and often too soon. I've got drawers full of technologies that don't work anymore. Isn't POTS just our current 8-track? Why is this different? What's the big deal?
Yeah, so you get into some of these specific devices out there that they can't be upgraded. So a good example, boiler room monitoring devices that only operate over POTS. I heard a great example yesterday from someone. There's a company out in California that does monitoring of the 911 public safety access points. It's all powered by POTS, for instance. You get into devices that it's just frankly too expensive to upgrade them to something more modern. So take an old commercial burglar panel, and it may cost them tens of thousands of dollars to upgrade that to allow communications over cellular. They just don't want to do it, right? They want to continue to run that device for the time being. And so it makes it a little bit different than other technology transitions because there's so many legacy devices that have been around for a long
Mm.
time that it's the only way they can communicate. And there can be implications in environment if certain devices go out of service. We can have a fire marshal, fire inspector come in and revoke your certificate of occupancy, for instance. So it's really kind of a fascinating space, even though it seems nichey. There's a lot of devices and wide-ranging impacts that can occur.
Yeah, it's also economics too, right? I mean, I saw an article that you had posted around the cost of pots if you are looking to have it. Wow, I had no idea that this was such a challenge. $400 for a phone line? That
Yeah,
sounds
it's fascinating, and what has started to occur is the CLEX and the ILEX will come in and double, triple, quadruple the bill again to try to nudge that customer to move away. And this has gotten the attention of a lot of folks. We've seen some really egregious examples. We have a hotel here in Austin that's using AirDial for their elevator. They're paying $1,100 a month for their POTS line. And they had to have it.
right. And an elevator phone, that's not the most
Elevator phone, yep.
popular device. Well, we're talking about problems here, but we also want to talk about solutions. So you mentioned AirDial. So tell us about AirDial and Ooma and your approach to solving this challenge for businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. So we became aware of this issue around 3 years ago in some conversations with companies in the Northeast. And what we realized is we had all the pieces in the portfolio to solve this, and it's a bit more challenging than trying to solve for a standard analog device like a fax machine that we've solved for in the space for a long time. So you get into fire panels and elevators, and there's different regulations, and you get into older devices that operate in legacy modem type models. So it really requires a lot of nuance and an end-to-end solution that can really adapt to some of these devices out there. So we had all the pieces in the portfolio. We combined them together into a solution called AirDial, and we built it for the most stringent devices, which would be specialty devices, but you can plug just about anything into it. And the nice thing is we own the whole stack. So it's our hardware, our software running on it, goes through our core call control platform, serves over 2 million users. We built a whole new orchestration management platform to try to make this really, really easy for customers to deploy, monitor on an ongoing basis. And of course, the ROI becomes very, very attractive for into organizations, if they're paying $400 or $500 a month for a POTS line. And it does operate over both cellular and wireline capability, and you can toggle back and forth, so you have failover between those two solutions. So it helps enhance the reliability. One of the surprises, to be honest, that we discovered is we figured most of the use case would be around these specialty devices. But we have a lot of customers that are still on IP-Centrex, believe it or not, and they like the dual connectivity, or they have on-prem PBXs that they just couldn't upgrade to SIP for whatever reason, and they want to maintain POTS lines for that. That was shocking, but a use case that we also have been solving for folks with the AirDial solution.
So are there, if you're going to be offering analog services or POTS services, are there regulatory issues that you have to address?
Yeah, and so it is an interconnected VoIP service. So, all of the standard requirements in that space apply, including around E911. But as you begin to touch specialty devices, there are some very specific standards around two categories. One is commercial fire monitoring. And so that's actually guided by a standard called NFPA 72. That's just a set of guidelines, though. It's actually regulated by what they call the authority having jurisdiction, which is your local fire marshal. And in particular, they have some stringent requirements around how connectivity works with solutions like this. So it dictates you can't run this over the public internet. And they actually call that managed facilities voice network. And so what we've done is we actually have cross connect with our carriers, wireless carriers. So it is a fully private connection, leaving their network into our own data centers. And then the other piece with fire is there's another standard called UL 864, which is actual certification for fire monitoring devices, something else we've achieved to really make this pretty straightforward for the fire inspectors. And then on the elevator side, ASME A17 regulates that. That's also the fire inspectors coming in. So again, they want to see enhanced reliability here because these are life safety impacting scenarios. And if you're not in compliance, you can actually get fined, or again, they can revoke your certificate of occupancy. So you're out of the building, right? If it's a hotel, that's a big deal.
Thanks for that question, Dave. We just lost half our audience with regulatory and compliance discussions. But look, I have concerns here because I used to work for gateway companies, Audio Codes and Dialogic, and weren't there these little ATAs or little 2-4 port gateways you could buy, and it would just convert them over and problem solved, right?
Yeah. So again, as I mentioned earlier, it's been around for a long time where you can use an ATA and plug a fax machine into it. The challenges you get into is with certain panel types, they'll operate with different standards that ATAs weren't built for. They'll behave like modems, different types of modems that ATAs weren't built for. And the issue is that's only one piece of the puzzle. So you have to take an ATA and you need to hook it into a call control platform. If you run into a device that's experiencing issues and you don't own both pieces, it makes it really difficult to then troubleshoot. And then the last thing is if you want to enhance reliability, you need battery backup that has to run a certain time. And then to deploy cellular, you'd have to insert a separate device into that environment for cellular connectivity. So you're monitoring multiple pieces. It really becomes a little complex for something that should just be easy. You set it, kind of forget it once it's in, and then if something happens, you get a text or an email alert so to go take a look at the device.
The problem I'm seeing with ATAs today is that there's no wires anymore. It used to be every building was wired for everything, and you could just run a wire. You had a wire already there. You could put an ATA in. But I just moved, and there's no wires anywhere in this place, and so the AirDial doesn't need wiring, I assume.
We don't, right? So it's fully cellular if that's how you want to deploy it, which is great. And elevators are a good example of this. Sometimes you're down in the basement where all of the analog connectivity is terminating. Sometimes you're at the top of the building. So it's just kind of a hodgepodge. And again, running that cabling could be a challenge in a lot of different environments for customers.
Is the wireless side what makes AirDial really unique? Is that your secret sauce, as it were?
Yeah, I mean, we think that, where the cellular networks have gotten, they're incredibly powerful now. This private connectivity that we've done really helps strengthen the story there. And you can always fall back on wireline too, as backup connectivity in that environment. But having it all in a single box, a single contained solution for that customer really makes this quite elegant.
Yeah, nice. I also saw that you were working with T-Mobile. Is that an announcement you can talk about, or is that?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
cool.
So that is public knowledge. So T-Mobile started selling AirDial back in September of last year. So it's been fantastic for us. And as you can imagine, this impacts organizations of all size. The insurance agent that has a fax machine and a commercial burglar system, all the way up to the Fortune 500 that have thousands of POTS lines for a variety of reasons. And T-Mobile obviously brings a lot of reach into the market. They have a fantastic network that really helps with the performance of this. So we've been excited about the relationship. And again, we want to drive as much awareness of the issue out in the market so that people can get ahead of it and not react like that hotel when their lines suddenly get cut off and they're in a bind all of a sudden.
Nice.
Well, Chris, I've known you, I don't know, 15 years or so, and every conversation we've had has always been around the cutting edge of VoIP and UCaaS. I wasn't expecting to have a compelling conversation around analog
around an
telephone
old
service,
technology.
but I'll take it. I'll take it. This is great stuff.
Well, Dave, your fax machines and your payphone are in safe hands. You can continue to operate them into the 22nd century now. So you're all good. And Chris, so we're all going out to events. Dave and I are heading down to the Cloud Communications Alliance.
I will be there and see you guys there.
All right, so we can continue this POTS discussion over beers. This is the kind of thing we talk about over beers, isn't it, Sad? And where else are you? Are you at Enterprise Connect?
I'm gonna go to the bartender and ask for POTS on the beach.
We should come up with our own unique mixed drink, POTS replacement. So we'll be at Channel Partners, of course, as a company.
Okay.
We'll probably swing by. We're not exhibiting at Enterprise Connect, but I'll probably swing by Enterprise Connect. Great opportunity to catch up with everyone. But oddly enough, right, since we've made such a strong push into this POTS replacement space, there are a whole bunch of events that we don't really know coming out of the UC space that are related to alarm dealers and elevator dealers and all these interesting scenarios. So we have a lot of events that are outside of our space, facilities managers trying to really carry the story and the message out there around what's happening with POTS.
And I assume you're focused now on the US, but this is a global phenomenon. Is that something you're looking at as well?
Yeah, we're actually in some discussions with non-US entities. So the FCC's taken more of a heavy-handed approach to this with the forbearance in particular, but every country is going through this transition. Germany has been the most efficient. They're about 99% of the way through their migration.
Of course they are. That's a very German approach.
The UK is starting it, so they're going to cease sales of copper services sometime this year, early next year, and then they want to start the deprecation of their network in 2025, 2026. So, it's expensive to maintain all of that legacy infrastructure. So the carriers have an incentive to try to get through this, as reasonably quickly as they can.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for sharing your mission and business, and look forward to seeing you next week.
Yeah, likewise.
All right, Chris from Ooma, thanks so much for joining us. And take care, everyone.
Thanks, David. Bye.